Hello there. Today I'm going to be taking a look at a wine from the Beaujolais region in southern France. This is a Morgon. It's a 2019 vintage wine from Domaine Louis Claude Devignes. And this domain is one of the leading producers, certainly of Morgon, and arguably from amongst the producers of Beaujolais. The estate is run by siblings, Louis Benoit and Claude Emmanuel Devignes. They took over the running of the estate from their father in 2004. They tend to prefer to be known as Emmanuel and Benoit. The estate has 14 hectares of vineyards in Morgon and specialises in making single climat wines. So there are 6 main climats in Morgon, and in some cases they will even produce from exceptional plots within those climats. Their Les Impenitents is a well-known wine from a plot in the Côte de Puy. This wine, labelled as La Voute de St Vincent, the cellars of St Vincent is the patron saint of winemakers, is very much their everyday drinking style of Morgon. Something of a regional signature wine that's probably more accessible than their top wines. This, however, still comes from plots of 45-year-old vines within the climat of Duby. Now, Duby is a climat at the north of the appellation of Morgon. It's to the north of Villé-Morgon, which is the town in the centre of the appellation, which is where the estate's cellars are based. The site has, very classic for the Beaujolais region, fractured granitic soils with a sandy topsoil. So these are very free draining soils that are very good at restraining the natural vigour of the Gamay vine, ensuring that yields are relatively low and the fruit is concentrated. So as I say, this is a wine made from a number of different plots within that single climat. Viticulture here in 2019 was probably in conversion to organics, as the estate was certified in 2021. Certainly they'd been only using organic treatments in the vineyard since 2005, and their practices are not to use herbicides but to plough the vineyard, to open the soil up, and then to conduct all the vineyard operations except the addition of treatments and the ploughing by hand, so that you're trying to avoid taking heavy machinery into the vineyards whenever possible, which would cause compaction of the soils. So that they're looking to foster the development of the microbes in the soils. So picking here was done entirely by hand, and then they refer to vinification as being traditional. Now by that I'm assuming they mean it wasn't done by carbonic maceration. When you look further at the notes, 50% of this was destemmed. In other words, the remaining 50% was fermented as whole bunches, which will help give that soft extraction and quite fruity character that Beaujolais is famous for. The domaine's practice here is probably more extractive than many domains. Evidently they'll use a lattice of boards to keep the cap of skins submerged during fermentation, and after fermentation the vatting continues for a further 10 days. Following cuvation, the wine stays in cement tanks aging. It doesn't see any oak, and it stays there for between 7 to 9 months before it's bottled. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? The wine has a relatively dark ruby colour, but it's not particularly deep. I mean, that's of a medium depth, and actually it's almost as if the colour is slightly browning. I mean, bear in mind this is a 2019 wine, so it's about 5 years old at the moment. So I'm expecting it to be fully mature, and the colour is certainly denoting that. The wine's got 13% alcohol, and it is throwing some tears on the side of the glass, but they're not pronounced. Now again, I've got this in a large, what would be described as a Pinot Noir glass, hopefully to ensure that the aromatics can express themselves to the full. So let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? There's a richness and a ripeness. The aromas start off with a sort of a lifted raspberry and fresh mulberry nature, and then tends to gain a bit more depth. There's a bit of sort of loganberry note in there, going through actually towards quite a ripe plum, almost to a prune note. The aromas become quite developed as they open up, and then at the finish there's a little bit of spice. Possibly that's reflecting the whole bunches, the stems being left in there. That's almost giving it a sort of a licoricey note. It's quite a spectrum of aromas there, stemming from lovely fresh fruit at the outset. So let's have a taste. palate is very smooth. There's a good freshness. There is that sort of slightly developed plum prune sort of note of red fruit, but then there's a lively richness, and that again has those hints of spice towards the back of the palate that open in a burst to give you a slight hint of licorice before returning to being more of a sort of a red fruit, ripe plum fruit with hints of prune at the very end. The alcohol's very well in balance, it doesn't stand out at all. The wine has a mid-weight and it's quite rounded, and that good freshness is giving quite nice length to the perfumes on the finish. Although the tannins are incredibly fine, they're silky or perhaps velvety, they do continue to give a grip throughout the relatively long finish. Looking at the Wine Searcher aggregated critic score for this wine, this vintage got 90 out of 100, and I think that's absolutely the correct score for this. It's a wine that's fully mature now, possibly has a year or two more of life left in it. Not a wine that I'd really be considering aging. Well, I've talked about tannic concentration, I've talked about good acidity, so it might well last longer than my assessment suggests. However, I certainly don't think you need to age this anymore. I have to say, I can still taste it in my mouth, and it's been a while there. For what is not a particularly expensive wine, I think this is offering some superb quality. So you can judge for yourself. It'd be good to know the price, thus I'll leave a link in the notes below to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, and you can see if it or other vintages of this wine are available in your market and what their pricing is. So thank you so much for joining us. I do hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, do please press the like button. That would be fantastic. If you have any comments, please leave those in the comments box below. We'd love to know what you think about the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to. If you have any friends you think might like to watch the video, do please pass it on to them. We'd really appreciate your endorsement in that way. But most importantly, do please try and take the time and come and join us for another tasting in the very near future, won't you? Bye for now.